morning, everyone, and welcome to RCCT Soul Talk with Sean and Father Jay. Today, we're going to be unpacking the topic of Lent, as it's fast approaching. In 2 days from the filming of this, we'll be having Ash Wednesday. We have 10 masses in our family, 2 at each one of our parish sites. So make sure you check the bulletin, the website, and our social media to see those times posted. Other than that, how are you feeling, Jay? Are you ready for Lent?
I guess so. You know, it does kind of creep up on you, especially this year since it begins a little bit early, with Easter being in March. So it's not like when you've got Easter at the end of April. It's kind of, you got a little more time to get ready.
I think we were talking at one point, I think you said this is almost the earliest.
Just about. I think Easter can be like a week or a week and a half earlier. Well, 2 weeks since it's a Sunday always, but.
Can you share, just because, from my own curiosity, because I once remembered how it's figured out, but how is it calculated, the date of Easter?
It's calculated by, I knew you were going to ask this. It's calculated by the calculation in the Old Testament for the Feast of Passover.
Okay.
Which is calculated on a monthly calendar, a lunar calendar, rather than a solar calendar, which we go by today.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why it's flexible. Easter...
It's something about the full moon.
It is. It's
of the equinox, right?
It is. It's after, was it the first Sunday after the full moon, after the equinox? So it's kind of, it gets tricky. You know, I knew that all in my head, but I've gotten old.
Well, it's interesting because I think, to, just as a sidebar before getting to some more of our questions, I think, though, the fact that Easter is movable is one of the reasons why it hasn't gotten as commercial as Christmas. Because Christmas is the 25th of December, that everything is catered to the 25th, get your gifts, buy your stuff.
Right.
And I think the fact that it's movable is actually one of the reasons, and I may be wrong, but I've theorized that over many years, thinking that may be why the secular world hasn't really grabbed Easter, if that makes sense.
Well, it does to a certain extent, but the secular world, and by that I'm saying the sales world,
Yeah.
basically, is kind of stuck. It's like a dog chasing its own tail.
Mm-hmm.
It has to be so far ahead of itself that sometimes I think it gets way behind itself, and it's just, like, okay, it's Christmas, let's put out the bathing suits, and, that type of thing. But at any rate, you do have it, especially with the chocolate industry, the candy,
That's true.
the flour industry. Those are the type of things for Easter, whereas with Christmas, it's a much wider.
You're right, because there's not really an Easter decorations.
No,
I mean mildly.
Eggs, flowers, basically.
But you're right, it's
Easter
much
bunnies.
more. To an extent, it's more disposable things, or consumables, like
Right.
Like you said with chocolate, flowers, they die, things like that. So, going more to the spiritual side, we often talk, when you and I talk about Lent, about the importance of like prayer, or getting ready for reconciliation at this time. What is the reason? What is the main theme of Lent that lends itself towards this increase in prayer and reflection?
Well, I think one of the things basically is that from the church's point of view, where Lent began, it's a time of penance. It's a time of preparation. And I think it's best expressed really in the scriptural readings for Ash Wednesday, where we speak of fasting, prayer, and almsgiving, doing things, spiritual things. Spiritual in the sense of we fast not to lose weight, which I could do, but the fact that you are giving up something that you enjoy, is every day, and is, not exceptional in the sense we eat every day. Or at least those of us who are lucky enough to have food do. And so we're giving up some of that. And that's an offering to God, saying, you've given us these good gifts, and we appreciate it. We appreciate it so much that we're going to give back. Prayer, well, that's an obvious, to come closer to God, to kind of narrow in on what's going to happen. Because Lent, as I said, is a penitential time, but it's also a preparation time. And I think that's important to remember. But I think we've gotten to the point where most people see Lent as a preparation for Easter, while Lent itself is actually a preparation for the Paschal Triduum.
Okay.
It's the whole Easter event, if you want to call it that. And the Easter event begins on Holy Thursday with the establishment of the Eucharist, followed on Good Friday by the actual sacrifice of Christ on the cross. Holy Saturday, when, as some of the ancient prayers of the church say, the world is in silence, it's awaiting. And then we come to Easter, which of course we celebrate on the night of Holy Saturday because of the whole ancient concept that the day begins at sunset. I don't know where that began, but that's what it was.
Well, and it's a much more Hebrew way, because I think still when their holidays are celebrated, they begin at sunset.
So at any rate, we have that, and so we're preparing to celebrate that, to get ourselves in the mood to actually be a part of that totally historic and yet spiritual reality of Christ's total sacrifice. The sacrifice of himself on the cross, but the giving to us these many years afterwards of the ability to partake in that through the Last Supper or the Mass, and then the joyous celebration where we go from deep sorrow at Christ's death and despair that the apostles had to the incredible realization that death has no power over Christ.
Oh, death, where is thy sting?
Yes, you want to do the whole exalted?
Yeah.
But at any rate, so it has that reality. And that's what the spirituality of Lent is. And I know in a world in which we live, we probably lost a lot of that. The busyness of our lives, the come and go and rush and this and that, where we have so many things happening. Just before you were speaking about next week being a school holiday, the school holiday, and how this week is kind of before it as far as school goes. Well, I think we've gotten into that kind of an attitude in our lives too. We've come to an expectation. We know it's coming, and we don't fully get into the whole thing. We kind of concentrate on Easter, which is not bad. Not bad
but
at
we
all,
miss the journey.
We miss how we get to Easter.
We talked about this with Christmas when we had one of our Christmas videos, because we were talking about Advent and how people sometimes look at the lead up to Christmas as more a drudgery, that by the time that Christmas finally comes, it's
okay, we're done with it.
Exactly, which we talked about, even the fact that it's because Christmas used to be a whole 12-day celebration, and now it's all focused on one day, and then even touching on the commercial side of it, the fact that you start seeing Christmas decorations in September, it's very interesting. But I wanted to talk on, because you brought up the giving something up in the context of fasting.
Correct.
But I wanted to talk about that tradition too. And I think we all know it because we grew up with it as kids. We heard about it in Sunday school or religious ed if you didn't go. My religious ed was on Sundays. But we always heard it's Lent, now you need to give something up. It's your time to give something up. Which I know now, and Father Sibby even said this weekend, and you had talked about it last time we had talked at one point, of possibly not giving up, but giving more. He suggested going to Mass more, maybe going to confession more, maybe giving a little bit more of your money for something, or donating more of your time. This idea, when we were kids, was always explained to us as the 40 days in the desert that Christ had. So how did it move into that, like in your childhood, or how do you view it as coming from
Well,
that?
I mean, it was a reality, and certainly it was a reality, not only in my childhood for us as kids, but also for our parents as well.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Lent would come, my father would give up beer for Lent, and that was set and dried, except on St. Patrick's Day.
Mm-hmm. Well,
St. Patrick's Day was always celebrated in our family quite fully.
I think even last year with it on a Friday, I think the bishop, didn't he abrogate? I think that's the word. The lack of meat on Friday, specifically for St. Patrick's Day.
That is a tradition that goes back to my childhood.
Oh,
in the
it
Diocese
truly-
of Buffalo.
There's too many Irish people.
Well, it is, and aside from one Polish bishop, all of the bishops of Buffalo have been Irish.
I didn't even think about that.
But at any rate, these things happen. The things you're mentioning, that you said Father Sibby mentioned, are important too. The giving a little more, but that falls into the alms category.
Mm-hmm.
And doing a little bit more, that also falls into the alms category. So what he's doing is he's stressing a different portion of what we can do for Lent, and maybe recognizing the fact that we've lost a little bit of the giving up. And I think that has something to do with the way the church has changed the laws about fasting.
Mm-hmm.
It used to be quite strict. You fasted. You had one meal and two smaller eatings to keep you going on the days of fast, which were Ash Wednesday and all of the Fridays during Lent.
I didn't realize it was the fasting part was all of the Fridays. I didn't. I had only known about the giving up meat. I didn't realize that it was actually meant to be fasting.
Right. But that kind of faded over time. And when the church came out with new regulations, they came out with basically the fasting, but they put age limits on it. Like, I'm way over the limit for having to fast.
Mm-hmm.
And and there's a bottom limit. And they basically confused everybody because everyone is confused between fasting and abstinence.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody thinks fasting is not eating meat, which is abstinence, not fasting. And so, you do have the Fridays of Lent still are days of abstinence, along with Good Friday and Ash Wednesday.
As the days of fasting.
Of
And
abstinence.
abstinence.
Abstinence now. The abstinence is really what's left. Fasting is on Good Friday and Ash Wednesday.
Mm-hmm.
So we've got all of these regulations, but funny in a certain sense that as people begin to ignore a lot of the regulations, somehow they pass it on to other things where they say, we don't have to do that anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's what's lessened this idea of giving something up for Lent, making a sacrifice. And yet the whole idea of sacrifice is the fact that Christ, on Good Friday, in his death, was sacrificing himself for our sake. And the sacrificing that we do, hopefully, is to unite ourselves with the sacrifice of Christ in a little bit more tangent way. Or not tangent, that isn't the word I'm thinking of. A little bit more realistic way.
Mm-hmm.
People may say this is a spiritual thing. Well, it is. But we are corporeal. We are body and spirit. And so sometimes we have to express the spirit in the bodily things that we do. And that sacrifice is part of our uniting ourselves with the sacrifice of Christ. At least that's my thoughts on it.
No, and I actually really like that because, again, growing up Catholic, one of the things that I don't mean this to disparage our religious faith formation in RCCT. I think we actually have really good religious ed directors. I know next year we have a lot of good plans to help unite and help the programs grow. But when I was growing up, we didn't touch on almsgiving. We didn't. It was what are you giving up for Lent? Probably candy or TV or pop. That was a big one back then, or video games. But the idea of giving something to somebody else really wasn't taught to us as kids. And it's funny because as an adult, I can acknowledge that all three are probably important, praying, almsgiving, and fasting. Mm-hmm. But I think the one I care about the most is almsgiving, or some form of almsgiving. And it's just interesting because it's the one that, as a child, I would have said is the most foreign concept to me.
Well, again, we change with times. In a lot of cases, almsgiving will seem to be what you give to the church.
Mm-hmm.
So kind of stressing that seemed to be a little bit self-serving, so to speak.
Greedy.
You could use that word too. And yet, it's one of the perfect reasons why Catholic Charities Appeal is during Lent.
Mm-hmm.
Gives us opportunity to express that giving for others.
And a side plug here,
yes,
they do so much good work. And I know I just want to take a moment to say what goes to Catholic Charities, and I'm quoting Father Mike on this, goes to Catholic Charities to oversee and to work for Catholic Charities. It is for the people that are used and helped by Catholic Charities. So those of you who are concerned of, the money's going downtown, and it's a direct quote from Father Mike, it is going to Catholic Charities, for Catholic Charities overhead and for Catholic Charities help to the poor. So it's a very important distinction, and the amount of good work that they do cannot be stressed enough.
And I know if I can chip into that a little bit, I know I've heard all my life about, well, I knew so-and-so, and they went to Catholic Charities, and they didn't get any help, blah, blah, blah. Well, Catholic Charities is limited by what they are given. They can only do so much. And sometimes they prioritize and, this area, that area. But I think it's expanded because they've encouraged, along with other organizations like the St. Vincent de Paul Society and others, the whole concept of soup kitchens and things of that nature, which are definitely separate from Catholic Charities, but also share sometimes in what Catholic Charities is doing and expanding. We've found that there are so many areas of need in these 8 counties of Western New York that comprise the Diocese of Buffalo. And not the least of which is brought to a forefront by the clergy sex scandal. Oh, it isn't only the clergy. I mean, that's gotten the big news, that's gotten all the headlines and everything else. But there are a lot of other people who have been
Abused.
Traumatized, abused, and not only sexually, but, mentally, emotionally, have been just thrown under the bus, so to speak, who need a lot of help. And as we're noting in the whole society today, there seems to be a lot more mental illness than we ever gave thought to. And they work in that area too, but it's just...
And it's a lot of good work because a lot of insurances, even to this day, don't cover a lot of mental health, or it's only covered if you hit a deductible, or so having options to help. Now, we are about where we are wrapping up, but so I want to ask, and this I think is really important because we covered a lot of stuff today. When is too late? And I know what your answer is, but so often you have people who it'll be the Friday after Ash Wednesday. I forgot to give something up. It's too late. Or it'll be 3 weeks in, I didn't increase my donations. Well, Lent's already over. 4 weeks in, I started saying I was going to give this up and do this, and I didn't do any of it. I said that I was going to pray more, or I was going to read the little black books. Plug for the little black books at all of the churches. We're going to make sure that they're out and visible at all of the churches, but they have prayer activities and things to meditate on for Lent. But I was going to read the whole thing. Now it's a week before Palm Sunday, and I didn't do any of it. When is too late?
Well, I think they have to give the honest answer to that. It's never too late to do good, to improve our spiritual life, to become closer to God by these means. Yes, we set aside this special 40-day period called Lent where we emphasize that. And I'm saying really, we emphasize that because it's hard to keep something going all year long. Look at New Year's resolutions. I mean, they're a joke because we just kind of fall away. Well, we do sometimes in our spiritual life, no matter how intense and purposeful we try to be. They got so rough. It was so hard. I fell asleep. I'm so tired. Whatever the case. Okay, that happens. It's like the old saying, if you fall off a horse, get back on. Don't say, well, that's it. I'm not going on a horse again. Get back on the horse. Keep going. So, so you hit that pothole. Okay, next time you go down the street, it's there, avoid it. All of that. it's never too late. It's never too late. And I'll tell you why it's never too late. Because as much as we want people to come to the Lord, to be with him, it's never too late for him. It's never too late for God because of the love he bears for us. And so, you can't get the whole thing in all the time, every day. Do the best you can. You start a little late. I'm sure there are people going to be, they're going to forget about Ash Wednesday. It's in the middle I have found it so real. You make announcements about things that are going on during the week, and people forget about them when that day comes. They just over their head with all the other things they're doing and going with and having to get done. So don't worry. You start late, you start late. Big deal. It's the intention that's most important, while the reality may not always be the same. And for that one, I'll go to the parable of the woman, the widow, going up to the temple and putting in 2 small coins that don't amount to anything with all the rich gifts that were being given to the temple. But Christ said she gave more than anybody else because she gave all she had. That's the important part, giving all we have. And that's it.
Well, Jay, thank you as usual for being with us, and particularly those last words. It's always nice to know that there's the encouragement, because I think sometimes people worry about failing and getting in trouble or yelled at. And I think that just matters so much to say we are human. We do the best we can, and we give all that we can. And sometimes we whoops. But I appreciate that, and I'm looking forward to our next time that we get together and do this. And thank you all for joining us. Last couple of plugs. Tomorrow we have our praise and worship night at St. Jude's at 7 p.m. It's a great opportunity because adoration is canceled on Wednesday because of Ash Wednesday. So come on out on Tuesday. You can have adoration with music, with readings, and it'll be the last time you get to hear Alleluia before Wednesday hits, and then they're gone for the season of Lent. Next Saturday, this coming Saturday, we have Baubles, Bangles, and Bagels, which is the St. Francis fundraiser for jewelry, where you can go get something to eat. Check the bulletin and the website and social media for more details. And then there's their chicken barbecue on the Sunday. Make sure you get tickets, because already they sold 200. So if you don't get tickets, they are only going until they run out of food. But if they know that there's more food needed, they'll be in better shape. And then finally, as Lent begins on every Saturday, the 5 Saturdays of Lent, there will be our Life in the Eucharist from 9:45 until noon at the 5 parishes, which is our Lenten retreat. It's going to be really wonderful. There will be more information about that on the website, online, and in the bulletin. And we hope that you can make it. Even if you can't make it to all 5, we hope you can make it to at least one. So thank you again for joining us, and we'll see you real soon.
Thank you again. Have a holy Lent.